Hello and welcome. We usually think of an immune system like a fortress. The stronger the walls, the better, right? But what if survival isn't actually about having the strongest defenses, but the smartest ones? Today, we're going to dive into this incredible biological balancing act. So let's start with this question. Is a stronger immune system always better? Your gut reaction is probably, well, yeah, of course. A more powerful immune system, that should mean less disease, a longer life. But out in the wild, where every single calorie counts, the answer is, believe it or not, way more complex. An immune response that's too aggressive can be just as dangerous as one that's too weak. And here's the key idea. You have to think of an animal's energy like a limited budget. Every ounce of energy it spends powering up its immune system is energy that it can't spend on other absolutely critical things, like finding a mate, raising its young, or running from a predator. This sets up this constant, high-stakes negotiation inside the body, a trade-off between fighting off infections and, the basic drives to survive and reproduce. So in this first section, let's really dig into that idea, this biological balancing act we call a life history trade-off. We're going to see just how high the cost of staying healthy can be. Now, this isn't a new concept. Biologists have been thinking about this for decades. And honestly, there's no better place to see it in action than on the remote Scottish islands of St. Kilda. It's home to a famous population of Soay sheep, and they give us a perfect, real-world example of this exact trade-off. This chart really lays out the tough dilemma these sheep face. See, they have to deal with some really intense gut parasite infections. So the sheep that invest heavily in producing antibodies, they have a much better chance of surviving those brutal winters. But, and this is a big but, that investment costs them. They end up having fewer lambs. Now on the flip side, you have the sheep that don't invest as much in immunity. Their survival rates are lower, no doubt. But the ones that do make it through the winter, they produce more offspring. It's a total evolutionary gamble. Okay, so all of this brings us to the actual scientific field that studies these questions. It's called eco-immunology, and it's all about taking immunology out of the clean, sterile lab and putting it into the messy, complicated real world. To put it simply, eco-immunology looks at how an animal's entire world, everything from the food it eats to the parasites it runs into, has shaped its immune system over millions of years of evolution. Think of it as the science of immunity, but on a huge, wild, planetary scale. And this diagram shows us something really cool. The internal immune system that we always think about, it's actually the last line of defense. The first defense is just behavior, trying to avoid parasites in the first place. Then you have the physical barrier of the skin. It's only if a parasite gets past all of that that the body's internal army really kicks in. It's a layered defense strategy. All right, to really get a handle on the costs, we need to understand how scientists look at the immune system. There's the traditional way you might have learned in biology class, and then there's a more functional way that's super useful for ecologists. So the traditional view splits everything into two big buckets. You've got the innate system. These are your fast-acting, general-purpose first responders. Then you've got the adaptive system. Think of them as the highly specific, memory-forming special forces. They take longer to get going, but they are incredibly precise. But eco-immunologists, they often prefer this functional model. They ask questions like, is a defense always on? We call that constitutive. Or is it only switched on when it's needed? That's called induced. See, an always-on defense has a constant low-level energy cost, kind of like leaving a light on all day. An induced defense is cheap when it's off, but it costs a ton of energy when you flip that switch. This way of thinking is perfect for analyzing that energy budget we've been talking about. Now let's see how this whole budget thing plays out in one of the most amazing examples in the entire animal kingdom, the immune system of a migratory bird. It changes dramatically with the seasons. Think about a migratory bird's year. It is just a series of incredibly intense, energy-draining events. You've got the epic flight of migration itself, then the frantic period of breeding, then this complete feather replacement called molting, and then just trying to survive the winter. Each one of these pushes that bird's energy budget to the absolute limit. So to manage this insane budget, birds do something that is just mind-blowing. To save energy and, get this, reduce weight for migration, they strategically downsize their own immune organs. The spleen, which is a major organ for their immune cells, can actually physically shrink before a long flight. Wild, right? And this is not just a one-off thing. As you can see from this data, scientists have seen this spleen regression in tons of different species, from garden warblers to mallards. It seems to be a common and absolutely vital energy-saving strategy to get the body ready for the massive challenge of migration. But here's the thing. The immune system isn't just turned off. It's strategically reallocated. As soon as migration and breeding are over, the bird faces its next huge task, molting. And for this part of the year, different parts of its immune system actually need to power up. Specifically, the thymus, that's the organ where T cells mature for cellular immunity, it gets bigger. So why would that happen? Well, when a bird molts, it's replacing thousands of feathers. Each one of those growing feather follicles is a tiny opening in the skin, making them super vulnerable to infection. So the body strategically beefs up the exact part of the immune system that's best equipped to handle that specific threat. It's an unbelievably precise reallocation of resources. So the big question is, how does a bird's body know when to shrink one organ and grow another? Well, the answer lies in the body's master resource managers, its hormones. It all kicks off with a signal from the environment, something as simple as the changing length of the day. The brain picks up on this change and triggers the release of hormones. These chemicals, like stress and sex hormones, act like messengers, telling the whole body to shift its budget. They divert energy away from the immune system to power migration, and then they direct it back to specific immune organs to get ready for the challenges of molting. Okay, so why does any of this matter? I mean, who cares about a bird's spleen or a sheep's antibodies? Well, it turns out this research has huge, real-world implications for everything from wildlife conservation to global health. Understanding these cycles helps scientists develop things called biomarkers to check on animal health without having to catch them all the time. But maybe most importantly, it helps us predict how diseases like avian flu get spread. If we know that millions of migratory birds are temporarily shutting down their immune systems for flight, we have a much better idea of when and where they're most vulnerable to getting and spreading infections. This knowledge is absolutely vital for conservation and for protecting both animal and human health. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's a totally new way of looking at immunity. An animal's immune system isn't some static fortress. It's a dynamic, constantly renegotiated budget where resources are carefully moved around to meet whatever the most pressing challenge is at that exact moment. This idea of a trade-off, it's a fundamental rule of life, and it's happening all the time, right under our noses. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other invisible balancing acts are shaping the health and survival of the wildlife all around us? And maybe, just maybe, even what's going on inside our own bodies.